Hey guys, I know I've taken a little break, but we're back at it. Welcome back to another episode of Heartablazepodcast. My name's Timmy, I'm your host. Uh, as you can tell, today's vibe's going to be very different. Um, I've been putting off this episode, to be honest, for a little bit because it's a lot, and honestly, I don't know. I'm not entirely sure how to go about it. I've made some notes and stuff, but um, like I know it has to be done, but once this episode's out, it's kind of like there's no way back. That's it, putting it all out there. But I also know that this is going to help someone for sure one day. Um, so today's episode is going to be talking about, if you're not aware, an opioid called meth. It's a drug, and you may or may not have heard of it, but if you're gay or new to the gay community, you probably have heard of it. It's relatively a big issue in the gay community. Has been for a while now, but I feel like it's just getting worse. And I have my own story about it, and I think today it's really much about sharing about it, but also kind of telling you why I'm coming out to talk about it, where I'm going from here. I think the best thing to do is first kind of you need to know about me and how it influenced me in order for us to talk about the subject. So the best thing is to kind of do a rewind back to sort of when I was doing my first main job of my career, and when things went down, how did that influence me, etc. So 2 years ago, I was still doing the job that I was in since pretty much like the beginning of my career, since I first started working. It was at a cake shop, and I've been there for like over 10 years, basically. So it's a huge chunk of a career, especially in hospitality. People are always surprised to hear if anyone stays even for like a length of over 5 years. Like, so 10 years is a huge amount, and it's a crazy amount. Not sure why I have itchy hands. But basically, it was a job that I thrived at because it was not the most organized place. It had a lot of issues. It was a pretty money hungry kind of business as well, which was not very good. Did not treat his employees very well. Kind of abused and took advantage of them. I thrived because I was also trained as a pastry chef before I went there. So I was able to take on board a lot of the task where I basically um, rewrote some recipes. I touch up cakes in ways that they kind of didn't consider to do it, and then like ended up like those things kind of spread across to other stores. Had a pretty decent influence, um, and I organized like what do you call it, paperwork for sort of like the baker side of things. I was basically taking over as sort of like a head of bakers essentially. But at the same time, I was also trained as a barista, so I was doing full-time job as a barista. I was also a supervisor role. When you're a barista, you had to be a supervisor role. So I overlooked a lot of stuff and a lot of responsibilities, and I thrived on sort of like, I guess, the disorganization because I was able to problem solve very quickly and was very good at it, and people relied on me and cared about me and loved me for that, and I had a way with people who were new, who were nervous. I used humor and my goofy personality to kind of bring people's personality out and just make sure people, like, a big thing for me was when I was teaching people, I always made it a huge point to always teach them why you do something rather than just giving you steps A to D and say do that and remember to do that, because I at least always remember how I learn things, and I'm a visual learner. That's one thing. Second thing is I always think you always remember something much better when you know the reason why you're doing it, especially when you're learning something new. And it just makes more sense because you're teaching knowledge, you're not teaching just like steps. Anyway, things started to get worse when my original main boss, who we interacted with the most, kind of dropped out of the business. And it happened very suddenly out of nowhere, and just kind of stopped seeing him a lot. And then his brother took over, and he was very much a different way of the business. He was very much business, business, and money, money. And a lot of people suffered from him taking over the role. And even our business as well, we knew we weren't a very busy location, but they reduced our staff down to the point where it was basically impossible for us to upkeep cleaning and also service at the same time. Like, there was no way two people standing in front of a shop where you have to man out 40 different seats of like customers that you can fit that many people. There's no way that you can clean things consistently while still having to make coffee, take care of like the POS and waitering people and cutting their cake orders, preparing their orders, preparing Uber, preparing all of those things, doing dishes, making like orders that we have to submit so that we can get things delivered. There's no way we can do all of that all at the same time every single day with only two people. And, it was to the point where even customers looked at us and were like, that doesn't really make sense. And but that doesn't stop the business from going that direction. And I remember it got to the point that was so bad that they introduced a breakfast menu, and they wanted us to cut things fresh. Like, they wanted us to smash avocados fresh. They wanted us to slice tomatoes like on order. And it just didn't make sense with two people, because then it would just take too long. And we were like assumed that in any sort of suggestion we made were because we were trying to be lazy, but really a lot of times we actually cared about the business, and we cared about our job, and we took pride in it. And I think it hit me very hard, and I probably was already kind of starting to feel a bit of depression at the time, I think, because I just really hated showing up to work, because it was very stressful, it was very difficult. And just sort of 1 year prior to that, I was having another experience that also, like, I think fundamentally contributed to this. I was at sort of my peak confidence, and it's not easy because for me in the gay community, you're like, if you're like very very skinny like me, you're kind of like a niche market. You're Asian to begin with, so you're not necessarily like a big mainstream market in terms of like popularity. You're very very skinny, like extremely skinny, then that's definitely like putting you in a niche market again, like a niche pocket again. Anyway, so it's not easy, but I felt really good about the way I was dressing, because I was starting to change from my wardrobe, from sort of what I used to wear, just kind of loose tees and all these kind of like stuff that didn't suit me, into something sort of more like formal casual. And I started to kind of really find myself and find my groove. And I was, feeling good about my life. I was surrounded by friends I cared about. I loved what I was doing. This was a year before things kind of went south. And I remember on Grindr, I spoke to a guy who came from Queensland, more specifically Bundaberg. He was a really, really cute guy. His name was Malachi. And I just remember messaging him saying that I think you have a really, really cute smile, because he really did. He had like the most amazing cute smile, and just like this kind of like energy about him. And basically we ended up like having like a few dates, and while he's still here, and we spent a lot of time together, and he really did give me the impression that he really liked me too. And even stayed at my place a couple of nights before he had to go. And I sent him off. I even gave him some jewelry, like, for my collection, because like I really wanted him to remember. We talked about plans. Like, I said I'd go visit him, and that his birthday was coming up, that maybe I could come visit him and we could like have something special. Just a lot of things, and even him like FaceTiming me and then offering to like keep it open and then falling asleep together. We even did that, stuff like that. Just, you couldn't deny that it was very sort of much like a relationship, like a dating thing. But he kind of randomly just decided to block me, and I had to chase him for like closure. And he was just suddenly kind of took a 180 degrees turn and said that he was just a lone wolf, wasn't really looking for a relationship at this stage, blah blah blah. And it was the closest I ever got to a relationship, and I haven't been in a lot of relationship, and it meant a lot to me. And it took me a lot of like the courage to basically kind of go up to some of my close friends and say, hey, I think it's finally happening. I think this is the one. I actually think, I've been holding it back, but I think it's actually official. We're together, like we're boyfriends. And that's how serious it got. And of course, like with that, it hit me pretty hard. And I think ever since after that, like I haven't felt exactly the same. And my confidence took a hit. And it's all underneath the surface. It's all things that I think like I just didn't realize was hitting me that hard. And then let's bounce back to work. So after 1 year, work was kind of going completely south. I just, and I noticed that like some of my closer friends, like everyone had like things that they were really, really striving for and busy with. And it's just, I didn't really get to catch up with a lot of friends, and I spent more and more time alone. And my best friend was, she was becoming more and more busy. She lived out west, so it was really hard to like catch up a lot of times. And she had a fiance now, and she was really starting to move on with her life, even though we spent a lot of time because we worked together. And we had like a 10-year friendship, but I think deep down I have a fear, still do, that friendships are something that won't last. Like I feel that people, especially like straight relations, heterosexual people, like they would eventually inherently, inevitably move on to sort of like building a family, and that will almost always kind of sets them away from friends, and you kind of have to build a new sort of friendship or move forward essentially. And things really did look that way. And she did like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff too, so she was often also busy on the weekends for other things, and she had other groups of friends. And more often than not, sometimes I just felt like I wasn't really that friend anymore, or I wasn't really offering anything. And these are all obviously like issues that should be talked about and addressed. But I've always kind of had that fear, and I think that's kind of part of why I sometimes pigeonhole people. Like I know that this person's a friend, this person's a date, like rather than sort of getting to deep dive into learning to know someone and just let things be. Anyway, so being with friends moving forward, that was a very, very big thing. And while I did still have a lot of other friends who were really, really supportive, I think I just was really set in that mindset that I didn't really know how to appreciate them as much as I should have. And I really regret that right now. So at one point, 2 years ago, well, almost 2 years ago, I basically, it's not 2 years, probably about a year and a half ago. At one point, I decided to meet up with this guy, and he was offering to use Meth and in a hookup. And I said, okay, I don't mind trying. And now this is going to be a bit of, if you're like a bit touchy and weird about these things, maybe just hold off on this episode. But basically, we did it through injection, so that hits you a lot harder, and it really goes through your system, and takes a toll on your body. So if you're thinking about doing it, I'd be first to tell you right now, do not do it. It's a really bad thing, and it's highly addictive, and very, very dangerous. Anyway, I did it with the person, and sure enough, things felt good. You get the dopamine hit. You really feel something, especially when you're not feeling a lot of things. You're feeling like maybe the onset of depression. And of course, that makes you feel like you're alive and everything's in an amazing place. And I went down the downward spiral from there for a little while. I just consistently used whenever I had free time and free money. and I met a few people, and there was a few people that, there was a person in particular that I met on the second time that he introduced me, and I didn't realize he was going to be there. And I had a crush on him because I thought he was very cute and he had a very interesting personality. Um, and and we had great chemistry when we were having sex or being intimate. And I think that was what really kind of pushed me even further to like keep going, because I really wanted to stick around with that person and also be in like the same world as him. And from there, like honestly, if you look back, it was really good. It was really, really obvious that it was not a good environment, because I already experienced people like lying to me and taking money, and people who were dishonest, or people who were just like not from the best background in terms of like they were cheating, or they were things that we found out afterwards. Not good. But I believe that this brings us to kind of where we'll be really talking about, and I'll give you a lot more details on these stories later on, because this is probably going to become a series, because I'd like to keep things updated and kind of let you know how things are going as we progress with the episodes. But generally that's the gist of things, and I want to move forward to kind of like talking about actual meth. So for me, I believe the main reason that I was using is, and it could be related to a lot of people's reason too, I believe a huge reason for use in the gay community in particular is for loneliness, is the lack of intimacy that feels like it's a lasting intimacy. Like hookups, great, you can find great sex and great intimacy sometimes, but a lot of it can be very, very short and very surface level. So once it's done, and you don't feel anything lasting, and you kind of feel maybe even emptier than you started, and before you started. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. And for me, I think it was because there was a lot of other things going on, and I was probably having an onset of some kind of like depression, or starting to feel that kind of way. Like I was always really severely sort of lonely when I came home from like an outing with friends for a while. It was happening. Like I go out, have a great meal out with friends, go out, have a drink, have a blast with all these girlfriends, come home, and then suddenly just feel this overwhelming sense of like loneliness. I have issues with my family as well, so I don't really have a family. So I really am on my own most of the times. And when you live in your own apartment, it's great, but you come home after such a big, I think it's such a big contrast, a big drop in some emotions. It's sometimes a little hard to deal with. But yeah, I believe it's loneliness. That's a huge thing. I think boredom is another one. Like when you feel like your life isn't going anywhere, you need that stimulation. One, because time passes a lot faster when you're on that, and two, it stimulates your dopamine, and in a time when everything feels shit, having not only just dopamine but such a huge like rush of it, or influx of it, like it's a very welcoming thing. And of course it becomes very highly addictive very quickly, not just because of the substance, but because of wanting to escape that feeling. And this is not to shame anyone, of course it can't really come from me, but I think those are two of the biggest drives for me. And a big thing, another big one, I think, would be confidence. Like I said, my confidence took a hit, and I think because of the first few experiences I had during the first time when I started using it, I became almost very popular during like intimacy times, and it kind of started to make me push and think like, this is making me popular, this is making me gain confidence. But really, it was kind of doing pretty much the opposite. But I think it's so set in your brain with like all these neural pathways getting like established, these new habits getting established. It's kind of almost become a new sort of thought process established. so ingrained in your brain that you think like this is going to make you popular. And I think that's another thing. Um, yeah, so I just think like meth offers a lot of empty promises. You'll think you're making friends, you'll think you're getting intimacy, you're gonna find someone who's gonna be like sticking around with you. You feel like you're gonna have some sort of extreme intimacy with someone that haven't experienced with anyone else before. All of these things are just like it's the drug talking, and funniest thing is it all comes down to whatever happens, however your story goes, I can guarantee you one thing that is 100% true, and I can tell you that there's no other way around it. You can think about it any other way, but it's just not going to be true. One way or the other, if you're in this life, and if you're doing this stuff, you're going to find the meth, the drug, to become the center of the argument at one point and a disagreement, and it's going to be difficult. It's just not a healthy thing. So I would take this moment to say, if you are considering or getting close to someone who's using it, I would say step away and really be sure not to use it or touch it, because it is a very difficult, sticky situation to navigate, and you just really don't know. Like, there's people who are like very, very different. I was very, very different before I touched it, and I think once I touched it, it's taken out like a whole different side of me that I'm really not proud of. And then I guess let's talk a little bit about like regret. Like, when I started using it, I also had moments where, because work was so bad, I decided I'd just like call in sick a lot more, and I didn't want to show up because things were going to shit anyway. But that also hurt some of the people that I was working with, and they were my friends, and I wasn't proud of them. And while they offered support for a little while because I kept going down that direction, and because it seemed like I was really kind of just destroying myself and being destructive, eventually they had to drift away as well, and I didn't really exactly reach out, so that relationship just all kind of like fizzled out. And I regret that, and I'm wanting to rebuild that right now if it's still possible. So this is kind of part of the reason why this video is so important. But the other thing I want to talk about was like with the people that I really felt like the special intimacy with. Now that intimacy, I would say, is actually real, and it's not because of meth making it so special or anything. What makes it special is the underlying chemistry that we already had. We obviously matched, and we had a good chemistry, and we had a good amount of interest in each other. And that builds to a lot of other intimacies. You touch more, you kiss more, you care more about the person's feelings and how they feel, and try to like be nicer to them and do nicer things for them. So follow the chemistry. You don't need the stuff, and it's not going to help you get there. And if you use it to distract yourself, to get away from problems, eventually once you wake up from it all, the problem's still going to be there. In fact, the problem will eventually definitely increase and become worse, to the point where you really just have no option but to keep going to avoid it completely. And it's really just not the healthiest way. You have to, if you want a good life, you have to deal with your issues, and you have to face your problems. So, I mean, if you want to know, I guess like we can also reflect a little bit. I think it would be good to reflect a little bit on what it's taken from me. So I think after about a year and a half, what meth has taken away from it, it's taken a substantial amount of help from me. I take a long time to rebound compared to when I first started out, and it's only been about a year. Like sometimes I lay in bed and sleep for like a couple of days and be struggling to sleep because I just don't feel good in my chest, or I have trouble breathing, or I'm completely dehydrated and feeling super nauseous. I've been having diarrhea sometimes. it's not it's quite serious. It's taken away my confidence. It's taken away my relations with people. It's taken away my finance. It's taken away my sort of my career. It's taken away sort of my integrity in terms of like showing up and being able to do things for people, because a lot of times something comes up from a friend and I'm just too in my head and too scared and too worried about them seeing me like this to be out there and be there for them. And those are some of the biggest ones, I'd say. So, take that into account. Next, I think I want to talk about depression. So, another thing that's worth noting, and if you have a chance, you can look it up, but we'll talk about it a little bit more in another episode. But when you use something like hallucinogenic sort of opioid enough, and in close enough sort of proximities, your body doesn't really have enough time to sort of detoxify it and work through it. And it takes a huge toll on your brain. And when you do it frequent enough and closely enough, or a huge amount enough, something happens in your brain called psychosis. And it basically puts you into a place where you're just imagining things. And that's kind of why you see all these crazy people on the streets when you refer to like crackheads and stuff. And I've had like sort of 2 or 3 of those episodes in my life. And one of them was particularly bad to the point where I could also have depleted a lot of dopamine. So I fell into a state when I was, as referred to, when I went into the hospital. They said I was stiff and unresponsive, and I was just looked like I was in a very, very dark place, and I just didn't care about anything anymore. I had almost felt like I'd given up, and that was my mental state after what I had thought I had gone through, because I was in my head, and it was a very, very dark time for me. And that's when they were like, so you might have depression. And I was on meds for that for a little while, but then I kind of realized that I was able to kind of deal with it. So I started to get off the meds myself, because I just didn't want to be reliant on that, because it just felt like it was just same thing, different, same shit, different story with like drugs, just using another drug to kind of get you out of the situation. So, I really don't want to be in that situation. So that's how bad it can get, and it can get you there to places where you have like permanent issues, where you have to like permanently, like, it can be, while we're on the subject, may as well mention that if it gets bad enough, sometimes psychosis stays with you forever, and then you start to have other mental illnesses. Depression is probably one of the luckiest of them all. It's probably more just from the dopamine depletion in such extended amount of time of it. And for me, so I find I can deal with it in the sense that when I can recognize that it's depression that I'm feeling, that I'm having a day where it's a bit flat and it's really difficult to navigate and sort of pump up energy, is because it's depression. I can usually push myself out of it and sort of do productive stuff and get myself into like the right headspace where I can feel really good. Now, the main issue with that's difficult, is, and I'm saying this mostly just because I think I want people to know how difficult depression really is, because depression gets a rep where sometimes people are just like, it's not real, it's just you being lazy, or it's really different, like, understanding what people say up until the moment when you actually have it. It's a whole different story. You move from a day to another day, and it could be like the best day yesterday, and it just slides into that other day so seamlessly that you think there's something wrong, because you're just like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why do I feel like this today? and you just don't even consider the most obvious thing, like you forget that you have depression, you forget that that's a thing. And I think that's the most challenging part of it, is recognizing when it's happening and immediately sort of jumping to action to deal with it. um, it's like it becomes such a part of you when it happens. You're just like, I like, I don't know what to do with these feelings. I like, why do I not feel anything for like a lot bunch of things? Um, which I think by then is all you just go, oh yeah, it's depression, like immediately. But sometimes it's just you're so caught up in it, and it really like takes over you that you just kind of lay in bed and you're just wondering about stuff. Um, so be nice to people who have depression, and look out for them, because it can be really challenging. It's a very, very scary state to suddenly just wake up into, and you never know when it's going to come back, like which days it's going to be. So yeah, that's pretty much the gist of everything I want to talk about, and I guess that brings us to the main point of this video, is why I'm moving forward and what am I going to do moving forward. So the whole point of being honest with this and being honest with myself is because one of the things I've always struggled with is being able to like sort of be honest and say that I'm a user and that I struggle with this. But that is what people need to hear. That is what people who are going through the same stuff need to know, that it's possible, that it's something that can happen, that someone out there is going through the same thing. And I'm ready to move on, and I am moving on. I'm making active steps to avoid it, obviously. I'm making active steps to reinvest my money into something more useful, or at least saving up the money and keeping them untouched. And I think this series essentially is going to be helping document my sort of growth as a person away from this. And a big thing for me is I want to bring back all my confidence. I want to bring back who I am, because I know like the things that made me work as a person. I know I'm goofy, I'm funny, I'm a caring person. I'm someone who's humble but like extremely confident about certain things. I have like a certain way I like to dress, that like I can present myself and feel amazing about myself, and I do it for me, not for other people. And that's been lost for a long time. But yeah, so I think main goals for this series right now is going to be: 1, staying clean; 2, I want to start confidence building kind of related talks as well, talking about like what am I doing to help, and what things like goals and milestones am I going to set for myself. I'm going to start setting goals for like things that I want to experience in life, getting out there, experiencing little things like on my wish list and my bucket list. Even as small as sort of like catching up with friends for like really good food. I'm starting to go out and play like at arcades and stuff, that little games that I've been wanting to learn, doing pottery, things that I've wanted to learn. And most importantly, growth and milestones for the podcast. I want to push myself. I want to learn new things. I want to keep asking myself, am I learning something new this year, this week? Have I done something that kind of pushed myself a little bit out of my limits and my comfort zone? There's so much that I want to do. And I hope you can join me on this journey. And I'm sorry if this isn't the video that you were expecting today. Like I said, it's a very difficult one for me as well. I'm sorry if it's a little bit messy and choppy with the way I approached saying everything and kind of piecing everything together. But I really hope it helps someone and it gives them hope that things will get better. It took me a long time to get here, mindset-wise, because there's just a lot of hoops to jump through. But I'm really ready, because I know this is not the place to build friendships, and this is not the place where, and I know there are friends waiting for me if I just reach out. I just need to be ready to sort out shit in my life and move on, and also enjoy the fun stuff like podcasts. Podcasting isn't fun to me and isn't me that I really, really enjoy. And I really, really am wanting to take the time to thank you guys for listening to my episodes, joining me on this journey, and supporting me. It really makes a difference. You guys are more than just a number. Um, and I hope that one day I can build a community big enough that everyone gets to kind of share and talk a lot more and chat in the comments, do polls and stuff. Um, but yeah, that's all for today's episode, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.